Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some more variable types and classifying these as some more advanced variables. These are things that you can use to speed up the code process, make it more readable. So let's just go ahead and get started on that. The first thing we're going to talk about is the enumeration type. The keyword for that is just enum. So let's go ahead and give ourselves a heading here. All right, so we're going to start out with the enum declaration. And again, the keyword is enum. And we're just going to call this enum game developer. Okay, so what we have here is a basic declaration. We'll go ahead and add some curly braces here, which is going to contain the values. And we're defining a enumeration called game developer, which in this case is going to represent the different disciplines or the different roles that a game developer might have. Just a simple case to categorize something. So we'll start out with, could be an artist, so we're going to use GD underscore and put a comma there for the next entry. And you can either do this all on one line or drop it down. I like to drop them down for readability. Could be a designer. Could be a programmer. And we also could have an audio. Okay, so there's four kind of high-level disciplines. Of course, you get producers and all those other different roles, but we'll just keep it simple for this case and show these four different kind of disciplines or roles that a game developer might have. And so what you're actually doing with an enumeration is you're basically assigning a named value to a number representation, numerical representation. And the reason that this is really helpful is, for another example would be like a weapon type or ammo, is if you're going through code, whether it's you're revisiting code that you've written or somebody else is coming to look at your code for reference or maybe to fix a bug, using enumerations in cases where just a numerical value is assigning a very different classification to a variable, then this provides a very readable way. For instance, if you're assigning weapons to your inventory, if 0 represents pistol, 1 represents a rifle, 2 is a shotgun, and 3 is a sniper rifle. If you're assigning or adding to your inventory, the value of 2, then yes, that's getting exactly what you need, but that's not very readable. But if you had all of your different weapon types in an enumeration, then you could assign the name shotgun or some name like that. And what it's doing is just assigning that value, but in the case of looking at the code, it's very obvious just at a glance what it's trying to do. So let's go ahead and just really quickly go through a case where you could use something like the one we've defined here. So we're going to define a new variable, and it's going to be of type game developer, and we'll call it new developer. Semicolon to end the line. So right now this is just going to be the default value, but we're going to go ahead and assign it right away to the value of the designer. So now we have this variable, which is of type game developer, which is our enumeration. The title of the variable is new developer, and we've assigned it the value of designer, which is also equal to the value of 1. We'll go ahead and put this up here just to keep in mind that this is 0 based. So what we've essentially done here is assign the value of 1 to this variable, new developer. But again, for readability purposes, designer is a lot more meaningful in the context of what you're trying to write code for than the value of 1. So if you have some function that's doing process, say in this context of a new hire, say you got a function that you want to run when this person starts that assigns out maybe their seat number or their workstation specifications based on discipline, whether you have a different setup, something like that. Sort of an abstract example, but something that kind of puts it in a real world context. So if you had a function that's like new hire, assign data or whatever, and inside that function you might have an if case. And so what you can do is now you can check that new developer against a value, say, is this an artist? And so if it is an artist, if that new developer was set to, in this case we would be passing that into the function or whatever, but just kind of take this in a real simple context. You can check against the value of new developer to see if it was equal to an artist. So what you're checking is this value equal to 0? It's not in this case because we assigned it to designer, which is equal to 1. So this would not test true. If we had another case here, an else if, and we're going to talk more about if statements here in just a few minutes. keep the spaces inside here for just readability purposes. A lot of coding conventions for different companies will have it be one way or the other. They may prefer it to be kind of tighter to keep the lines shorter, or may prefer the more readable kind of format like that. So in this case, we had an else case here. So we're also saying, if it's not that, what if it's this? And we're checking its designer, then we could call some other function. And it could just be that the actual processing is done inside this if case or whatever. Just an example, it could be some amount of script or code that you run here if this value is equal to this. So that's a really kind of simple use case of how you would use an enumeration. Starts at 0. You can define, any named. It could be fruit. It could be weapons. It could be time of day. You could have a morning, day, night, or even middle of the night or midnight kind of setting. And maybe that's running different code for your lighting or your skybox or something like that. And so you can be checking in your update functions for the game to see what time of day it is, essentially, if you're kind of snapping to certain time periods. And that gives you just a really readable way to say, if daytime, set values to this, and if nighttime, set them to something else. So enumerations, just again, really good for readability in code and for kind of writing code faster, not having to spend a lot of time tracing back up to where, say, the weapon list, or in this case, the list of developer types was defined. You just kind of know by that name. All right, so next we're going to talk about structures.